Welcome to Anxiety is Real, the one-of-a-kind podcast that takes all of the successful components of individual counseling specifically for anxiety disorders and creates a 10-session podcast model assisting children and adults in understanding and managing their anxiety effectively. This podcast was specifically designed by anxiety specialist and licensed therapist Jodie Smetak, who with over 12 years of license experience and over 20 years of field experience has successfully helped hundreds of children and adults overcome their anxiety by utilizing this specially designed program. Now, without further ado, please welcome the host of Anxiety is Real, Kris Smetak.
Welcome to this week's episode of Anxiety is Real. Thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you with us today to learn about anxiety. Another great show lined up for today. We're going to talk about helping children with anxiety. And if you remember, we did part 1 a couple episodes ago. This is part 2. This subject warrants some extra attention because our children are struggling with anxiety at alarming rates. They're being exposed to increase in anxiety over the years. And the big challenge, I believe, is the solutions in managing their anxiety are not being taught anywhere. So we're happy to, put a platform together and an episode together, a part 2 for you to help your children, whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a counselor, whether you're a person, a neighbor, and helping all children, manage and deal with their anxiety effectively. I believe the combination of those two things that we're talking about, the increase in anxiety in today's society and the lack of understanding on how to deal with it, is a recipe for a disaster, in my opinion, or an epidemic. And with that, we know that a lot of people and a lot of kids are struggling out there. So once again, we're happy to have you join us here today and to talk about ways to help the young ones, manage and understand their anxiety effectively. Once again, thank you for joining us. I'm Kris, and I'm a licensed therapist with over 10,000 hours of specialized experience training in life and anxiety, co-owner and therapist for Genuine Counseling Services. My wife and I opened Genuine Counseling to help individuals, manage their feelings, deal with difficult life events, and, help them and assist them maximize their potential. And with that, I am so happy to have her here today. She is going to be our guest host. How are you, Jodie?
I'm doing good today, Kris. Thank you for having me.
Yep, absolutely. 1 to 10, how is your week going, Jodie?
It's a 10.
A 10 week? Fantastic. I'm so glad that you're having a perfect, awesome week. So continued good days and good whatever it is that you're doing, and happy for you. Marcus, how you doing today? 1 to 10. Actually, how's your week going? 1 to 10.
1 to 10. I'm at a fine 9, my friend.
A fine 9. And with that, I hope it flies into a 10 sooner than later because you so deserve it. So today's show, as we talked about before, we're talking about how to help kids, who are having a tough time with their anxiety. And I think a couple things that make it difficult is, identifying anxiety with kids. Who has it? And if you talk to kids these days in the hallways, who has anxiety? Not me. And, unless they're really comfortable and being able to talk about their feelings, they feel if they have it, they need to go to the doctor or there's something wrong with them, is the message that's being out there. So today's goals are, we're going to come up with 3 strategies to help any child with anxiety. And with that, we're happy to have you join us today. A couple reminders, review pieces for discussion purposes. If you've been tuning in, from session 1, anxiety is still normal. Okay, what we've learned is everybody has it. It's the piece on how high it is and how long it's been that high, so to speak, that has been the challenge that we want you guys to be aware of. And with that, knowing that and being aware of it is helpful in itself. So just to get started, what are your thoughts on anxiety, with children these days? Jodie, what are your thoughts on it, on how kids are dealing with anxiety? And what's your perspective?
That it is a real struggle for our children and our adolescents out there, and that a lot of times we as adults don't understand or really grasp all the pressures that our children and our teens are under. And that it's really important that we start doing that because they need us. When we say it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village. But us being a part of that village, we have to listen to our children and our adolescents and understand that as we go through things, they go through those things with us.
What do you mean by that? Things. Talk about things.
They go through divorce. They go through bad relationships. They go through financial stressors. They go through their parents losing jobs. They go through bad days at school and us saying, oh, well, you still have to get that 5-page assignment done and just get that homework done. And we don't pay attention to just how big a deal that might have been for them and say, you know what? Important. Yes, homework is. But tell me how you're feeling today.
Whoa. So you're saying ask them how they're feeling?
Ask them how they're feeling. We need to know.
Wow. I mean, that could be a scary topic for a lot of people. And, we've talked about episodes before on communication styles and, basically the systemized response that we typically get when we ask someone how they're doing. That good, fine, and okay. What if we keep getting that? I'm asking. I mean, what do we do with that?
I think sometimes we have to be careful how we ask the question and what expectation our children feel they need to meet when giving us an answer. And what I mean by that, for some clarity, is sometimes we want to know how our children feel, but we want them to be okay. So when they answer us, well, we say, how are you? And they tell us, well, it didn't go real good. Well, that isn't the answer that we wanted. That's what we needed in that 5-minute drive.
Attitude. What's wrong with you?
We needed the answer in 5 minutes from the time I pick you up in that car rider line to the time that I have to drop you off at that daycare or that babysitter or that sports event. I need you to be fine. I need you to be good. So what do you mean you're not good? Because that takes time. And sometimes time is something we don't always have. So our kids learn that. Our children learn that.
That is the story of my life because that word again, expectation. It's like if you're asking your children how they feel, you have to really acknowledge what their response is. Because at times in my life, it was like, wah, 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 wah. Because no matter what you say, I know how I want you to feel. So I know what I'm going to say.
How did that feel for you? Do you remember how that felt?
It felt like I was doing the right thing for a while until one day I realized that wasn't working because I really did not understand what my children were going through. And I really wasn't helping them through it because I was pushing my expectation of how they should feel on them. And so now it's a very different type of conversation. And a very different response as well. And I had to learn, too, that sometimes you have to let them feel how they're feeling. You have to allow it to happen.
Yeah, that's a powerful piece of feedback. And it's right on, in my opinion, is allowing them to feel however they need to feel. It's the validation piece that we talk about. So with that, going back to the first episode was, asking their number. I encourage everybody in the audience to ask, how their day's going, to their children, 1 to 10. And like I said, it can be abnormal at first, but they can get them used to it. And once you do, then it can make it easier for them to really know, not just, for you to know where they're at, but most importantly, so they understand where they're at. They're the ones who's got to deal with their feelings, y'all. And you got to be the one that helps them keep it real. So to speak. So, once you get past that, then throw in the anxiety number for discussion purposes. Could you imagine that at the dinner table? All right, everyone, it's time for dinner. But before we do, what's your anxiety number? 1 to 10. 10's high, 5 is medium, 1 is low. Okay. I want you to picture the looks on your parents' faces, okay, if you would have brought that up back in the day. But most importantly, I want you to try it. We want you to really create that dialogue. Because as you've been listening to these podcasts, anxiety is normal. So if you don't talk about it, then it may not be real for people. And this is where, people are struggling with, anxiety in general because they feel there's something wrong with them because they feel anxious all the time.
So, Kris, can I add in something you just said that
Sure.
I think is really important?
Please.
When we talk about strategies that you can use to help children with anxiety, is not only ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, pick a time and a place, because that's essential.
What do you
Pick
mean
a
by that?
time and a place. So if you're driving in the car and you only have that 5 minutes, might not be the best time.
Yeah.
Because you know what? You're not listening with all of you.
Wow.
And that's the piece that gets us sometimes. Is we ask the questions. We talk to our kids, right? But not always right. Sometimes we listen with our ears, but we fail to listen with our eyes. And a lot of times our kids won't say, but they will show. And if you can pick a place and a time where you can sit and you can not only listen with your ears, but listen and see with your eyes, they can show you things that they don't always tell us.
So paying attention to that body language. And obviously, if you're driving in the car, then you're not hearing or you're not seeing, the whole number, so to speak, or the feeling. You might be missing something very, very significant. So, creating a space. Could you give us an example of how you would do that?
You had a really good example. It's time to sit around the dinner table. A lot of times we do our prayer around the table before we eat, maybe after the prayer before we start eating, or before the prayer before we start praying. We say, hey, we're going to sit down and give our number for the day, because that is an undivided time. There is complete attention on that moment for the person speaking. Whereas when you're in a car or you're running somewhere, there's a phone usually in somebody's hand, somebody's texting, somebody's calling, there's radios going, there's PlayStations on, gaming to be had.
What?
It's not probably the best time to give undivided attention, but when you can sit and you can look and you can see and a person can feel heard, and our kids just want to be heard and they want to know they're important enough to be heard and
That's
looked
really
at.
good. That's really good. I if I may, I think one of the things for me also, to your point there, was it wasn't just acknowledgement at times, but behaviors don't always mean that your children are off task or off focus as far as like they're trying to be disobedient. Sometimes it's just a result of some feelings that are there that just need to be addressed. And sometimes you have to have that intimate time, whatever you make it. My son, we have what we call guide time. Guide time developed from a bad year actually that he had in school, because he's usually great in school, but he started having some behavior stuff go on, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And so, we hung out, he and I, one day, and we really got somewhere with communication, and he got some feelings out. And so thus that created God time. So when he says, Dad, it's been a while, we need some God time, it holds me accountable as well to say, you know what, we do need some one-on-one time where it's just you and I, not the younger siblings.
Love it.
You're my oldest, my eldest. Let's go hang out. And usually it's some great communication comes from.
Yeah, what a wonderful piece of feedback. Thank you, Marcus, and thank you, Jodie. So that would be strategy number 1, is creating the time and creating the place. And, you will have to be the leaders in that. You will have to be the ones that say, hey, we're going to talk about this time. We're going to do this Father and Son Sunday. Whatever it is that you do. Why? Because you're in charge. Okay, y'all, you can't just say you're in charge, y'all, whenever, you need things done. Okay, be in charge all the time. And what you'll find is, by taking care and giving them an outlet, it will be easier for you. So creating the time and the place for discussion is strategy number 1. And, that's something that you can start ASAP. And we encourage you to do that. And it will give them an outlet. The other strategy that we got into a little bit is on the basis of creating the time and the place is creating the environment. And the environment a lot of times comes with setting limits. And what we mean by setting limits is this, okay? I might need you guys' help with this. Back in the 90s, when cable TV was booming, okay? And it was like, man, they were adding stations. Even you had one of those big things, satellite TV. But remember how big and comprehensive they were? And you thought that person was like trying to build a spaceship to talk to the aliens, okay? Back in the 90s, TV was pretty good, and it was getting good. But here was the thing, okay? If you sat and watched TV for more than 2 hours, there was a term that they would give. Go ahead. What you got for 20 points? Okay, if you guys know this, 20 points. Go ahead.
Couch potato.
Yes, sir. Ding, ding, ding. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. It was a couch potato. Okay, so with that, we have forgotten about that term, some of us. But here's the deal. Let's fast forward 20. Let's just fast forward some years, y'all. Okay, let's just go ahead to the present. Okay, so not only do we have the most elaborate cable TV, the most selection that we have ever seen. How many stations do you think there are at this point?
Well, with UVerse, you can just add 100 at a time, Kris.
100 at a time. You guys catch that? Netflix, Amazon. We're talking NBC, ABC, YouTube. We're talking. Okay, that is just one facet, y'all. Okay, now let's get into the game systems, y'all. Okay, name the game systems out there. Go ahead.
Xbox 360 and
Switch.
One.
Nintendo Switch.
Yes. Wii.
PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
Atari.
4, yeah.
Yes,
good.
I said it.
That's
Atari. Some people still have Atari, and love our Atari listeners. So thank you guys for tuning in.
Oh,
so let's add that. Okay. Let's add YouTube in there too, because it's its own entity.
And phone apps.
Okay.
Never end.
Okay. So how long could you be, engaged in these forms of entertainment?
Every day, 24/7, 365.
You could.
Very true.
How much time are your kids spending, on their devices? Watching TV, watching YouTube. Okay, and if you remember, going back to that piece on the CSU, the coping skill utilization number. Okay, that was an important episode, because if it, doesn't help you feel better, essentially, it's not an effective coping skill. And what I have found in the practices and in our practices with individuals that we serve is balance is important in all that you do. So if you're spending, or your child's spending 4 hours a day, 2 hours a day, and they're not doing anything else, I'm here to tell you that they would benefit from setting limits.
So, Kris, are you saying now that setting limits, strategy number 2 will be putting time limits on our children?
Putting time limits, or taking away all their devices, putting them away in storage. I'm saying parents, go out there right now, lock up the Xboxes, take away the TVs. We're taking a stand today. No, I do not want that. Kids, I was just joking. We would have a revolt of some sort if that would happen.
World War III.
Yeah, we're not ready for that in episode 8, maybe episode 10. But with that, think about it for yourselves. When you have effective time limits, and balance in your life. Something that doesn't get a lot of discussion, and it is, in my opinion, no surprise that anxiety is going, basically through the roof in individuals, society-wise, because it's something we don't talk about. When's the last commercial that you've seen on TV or, YouTube that encouraged, a healthy, balanced life? What were they selling? I have no idea.
So now you're telling us, well, I think I said the first one would be setting some real good time and place to talk.
Yes.
And now we're going to set limits as strategy number 2. What can we do for our kids for number 3, Kris? What's the magic 3?
Okay, the magic third one would be when it comes to these things, as we talked about earlier, being that there is a void in, the teaching or the education of feelings and discussion of feelings. If you can't make the time to do it, or you're just not comfortable with it, then, sign your child up for some counseling, get them involved in somewhere, someplace, whether it be a life coach, counseling, that will help them understand their feelings, better, so they know what's normal and what's not. Because the last thing you want to do is to send your child to school, okay, middle school, elementary school, high school, in 2018, feeling not normal. What's out there in the hallways for not normal kids, in 2018? What do you see? Yeah. And how are we dealing with that trouble? What do you see? I mean, and I think those are the challenges to where if you have a majority of individuals who feel that something's wrong, they don't know what it is, but yet they're not talking about it. I mean, I think it contributes to the things that are happening today as well, the tragedies that I think we can, become more of a solution focused society just by, doing what Jodie had said and setting the time, setting the place, and talking about anxiety to normalize it and, how to, effectively manage it, but also, limiting, time spent on, devices and things, that takes away from the focus on feelings. And then, with that, also getting them connected to appropriate resources. And it's not just whenever it's a crisis. I think that's where we become as well seems to be going just fine. Well, they've been saying that to everybody, and it's not, so what you have to do is, give them a personal, space, a personal place to, let someone know that maybe things aren't as great as they seem or as going as good as they can.
And I think the other part, Kris, is knowing that as parents, I think sometimes there's a pressure to say, I have to have all the answers for my child. I have to be the one to get it right.
Do you feel like that sometimes?
From me. As a mom,
yeah.
Yes, I have.
What's that feel like for you?
It feels like a lot of pressure. And here's the other point. Our kids are sponges.
Mm-hmm.
And what they see us go through or what they see us struggle with,
mm-hmm.
or if we're not using our coping skills and we're not taking care of ourselves, it does fall on them.
Yeah.
They will carry that anxiety too. So if you're struggling to be able to help them, that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can I share a story?
Sure.
At 12 years old, I made an attempt to take my life. And here's the thing about that. Thank God it wasn't as serious of an attempt as it could have been. But I can remember where my headspace was at that point, like it was yesterday. There was a lot of static, confusion that was going on in the household at the time. My parents just weren't getting along. And I didn't understand what was going on as a child. The only thing I felt was because I was the oldest child, the big brother, and I had a lot of responsibility with my younger siblings. I felt like that I needed to do more, than I wasn't doing enough, and so I felt like it was my fault that these things were going on, and I never told my parents exactly how I felt.
What stopped you think?
Well, honestly, around that time was when I was introduced to faith, to my faith. Honestly, And that was the one thing that, I had gone to a couple of services, and actually the pastor had talked about, suicide and some of those things. And it was kind of like a counseling session, honestly, for me.
Awesome.
And it helped me reverse my thinking about, taking my life. And, I still have a little scar on the side of my wrist from, my attempt, if you will. But I just remember thinking as I got older, I thank God that I really didn't go through. But then also as I had my own children, how can I release them from that burden?
Absolutely.
When there are issues, because, let's be honest, as adults, we have issues sometimes.
Oh yeah.
They come
Did you
up.
say sometimes? Wait a second. I want to know what you're having for breakfast.
But it's so important that we communicate with our children.
Sure.
And let them know that they're not at fault for the challenges that we face.
That's a great piece of feedback, and man, I'm so glad that you overcame that tough moment, and you're using it not just as an opportunity, to obviously make things easier, and you found a great outlet, in God, but also in being a change, for your children, by having that. And this is tough stuff, y'all. If that's the one thing you're kind of squirmy of, like, well, how do you talk about suicide with your kids? Okay. In my opinion, you can talk about anything. Okay. And it doesn't have to mean you have to be comfortable with it, but just understand that, it will help if you do, just by creating discussion. You'd be shocked at the amount of kids who struggle with suicidal ideation, is what we call it. It's just something that is not easy to talk about, even in 2018. And until you create that communication, that allows them and, validates how they feel, then they may be keeping it repressed. And that's the last thing, in my opinion, that you want them to do. So with that, be that change. Don't, if they tell you things, you don't have to hit the alarm, button. If they tell you things of the suicidal nature, you still have to listen and validate it. But we also encourage you to talk to a counselor. Why? Because, they're going to be able to assist you, professionally, and give you, from their standpoint, their professional clinical background of how to act and how to respond. If you try to do it yourself, it gets to be too challenging, too emotional, and too difficult. And as Jodie had said very well, that phrase, it takes a village. In my opinion, in 2018, it takes a country.
Yes.
And I mean that sincerely. I mean, have you seen college tuition costs these days? It's through the roof.
Yes.
So with that, in review, are 3, strategies on helping our children, manage their anxiety, is identifying the time and the place to have these great discussions to where you can take it in uninterrupted. Okay. The other piece is setting time limits on, their electronic devices, especially if their numbers are high. If you go back to the earlier episodes, if they're running, you're having that dinner discussion on how high is your anxiety, and they say it's 25, you might have a problem on your hands, in a sense of you got to do something, because they might be like, their eyes are really wide open and they're like, what's wrong with the 25? And, with that, we're telling you, want to be able to have these feelings and move through it. So setting limits is something that will be very helpful. And then the other part is to seek professional help. It takes a village, and it takes a heightened awareness, for people to understand, what's going on, what's normal, and what's okay and what's not okay. And if they're not okay, how to effectively manage, their feelings and get through those moments, those difficult times. So with that, we would thank you very much for joining us today. It was a great show. Thank you for Jodie for helping us out again. It is great to have such a wonderful, wonderful person and a great counselor join us and give us her perspective on what she's seeing. Also, thank you to Marcus for his divine assistance and genuine counseling for sponsoring this program. Till the next time we meet, thank you for joining us. No homework. We wish you a great week filled with heightened awareness, great self-care, and all the success and happiness that comes with it. We'll see you next time.